let's go ahead and get started. My name is Lane Huff. This is the Cuckoo Sandbox and Dynamic Malware Analysis talk. If you're not here for that one, you're in the wrong place. So I'm going to go over the agenda really quick. Who am I? What is dynamic malware analysis? What is static malware analysis? An overview of Cuckoo and some of its features. How to hide from malware, and then we're going to look at a few malware samples. So really the goal of this talk is to not make you a master malware analysis analyst at the end of the day, but it's to give you kind of a few seeds to start thinking about, if you want to look at malware, especially in a sandbox, what are some of the ways that you can approach it, and what do you want to look for? So that's kind of where I'm going to go with this. And again, feel free to ask questions if you have. I'm going to do my best to give you guys a little bit of time at the end. So who am I? I am a security engineer for Secure Innovations. We do a lot of DoD work in the Maryland area. I do a lot of software assurance work and penetration testing and a little bit of this and that. Also do a podcast, which is Primal Security podcast. So we have a few guys here that are presenting today that are on the podcast. Give us listen if you like. We have some blog posts to some introductions to Python and how to use that in a pen tester role. Do a lot of open source work, and also I love to travel. I've been to most every continent right at this point, but it's one of my hobbies when I'm not staring at a computer. Also, you can follow me on Twitter. If I can get up to 95 followers today, I have 92, so I only need 3. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. What is dynamic malware analysis? So, a lot of times when you think of malware analysis, a lot of people are just looking at a piece of code and trying to figure out what's going on. Dynamic is basically running the malware or the sample that you have and seeing what it does. It could be running an executable, running a DLL, opening a document, a Word document or something like that, playing a media file or opening a zip file. Just see what goes on in the system when you do that. But before we get too deep into that, we do need to talk about static analysis, because that's where everything kind of started off in the malware analysis community. So static analysis is analyzing the file at rest. It can be any of the files that you run, because again, malware spreads by being run in a lot of cases. But you can also look at memory dumps. You can look at network data, like a TCP dump file, PCAP file, and then a lot of people use debuggers, and we've listed a few examples of debuggers up here. A lot of them, the information that comes from this is through file metadata, so a lot of files have appended to it a lot of information that can give you information about the file and where it comes from and if it's a legitimate source or not. So here you can see an example of some static analysis on a malware sample. I don't know how to pronounce that company name, but it doesn't look very legitimate to me. And same with the original file name. It's pretty shady here too. Also, you can look at the certificates that were used to sign the application. A lot of cases now, malware is being signed using forged signatures and things like that, and it's a good indicator. So one of these samples that I've looked at recently is a spy mail sample. There's a lot of information on this on the web, but basically somebody took a legitimate signed certificate, signed the malware, and now it's rejected and put into the CRLs, but for a long time it was considered a legitimate thing to get through your certificate signing checklist. You can look at the development environment, where it was compiled, the system information. A lot of people leave these in there, especially guys that are just trying to like create things left and right to get them out the door and get a quick win. If you look at the top of this, you can see where it was developed. It was developed in somebody's admin folder in Visual Studio 8. I don't think many legitimate shops develop like that. More information is the compile time. So the compile time on this piece I'm looking at was 1992. The minimum OS version was 4, which correlates with Windows NT 4. NT4 was released in 1996, so this application was developed 4 years before it was required to be used on the operating system. Britney Spears does not approve of that. Another thing you can look at with static analysis is the different ways that it's compressed and obfuscation tools that are in there, and variable names. A lot of times, especially in like word macros and things like that, you'll see people that use these obfuscators, which will change all their variable names into nonsense and make it harder for the analyst to figure out what's going on. You kind of have to like figure out, backtrack and go in there and look at that. This is one example, Smart Assembly. You can just get this by running strings on this specific sample. Smart Assembly is a obfuscator for .NET code. It doesn't really hide the fact that it's used. This is a Word document that had 2 macros embedded in it, and all of these variables are just nonsense, and a lot of times you have to go back and piece them together and figure out what's going on. But what does the program actually do, right? So you can read the code, you can read, in a lot of cases, the scripts that are in macros, and try to back in and figure out what's going on. But that doesn't necessarily tell you what it's going to do, especially if it reaches out to the internet and pulls down more code. So, why do we want to do dynamic analysis? And really, what is it? So these obfuscation techniques will mask it from static analysis a lot of times. And they don't, the malware authors do not want you to look at their code, because if you can figure out what they're doing, you can find ways to bypass what they're doing. So there's some options that you can use when you're talking about dynamic analysis. You can run it on your own system. Anybody got a laptop here? I got some malware samples if you want to run it. You can run it on a VM, and you can run it on an isolated physical system. Doing this and then going in and doing forensics afterwards is a pain in the butt. Some people do it because it's easier, but to actually control the environment, but it's hard. So what is Cuckoo? So this is where something like Cuckoo comes in. It's a malware analysis platform. It can run all these operating systems: XP, Windows 7, the newer versions run Linux, Android, and OS X. And it supports a bunch of architectures now: VirtualBox, KVM, Workstation, VMware, Zen Server, and you can actually set up bare metal devices to run with Cuckoo. Does registry analysis, process analysis, all this stuff. I'm not going to read it all to you. You guys can read it. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with Cuckoo. But one of the things you have to do when you consider it, going back a few slides, is consider how you deploy your sandbox. So everybody likes to build a VM and share it with their friends, right? So the problem when you do that, if you build a Cuckoo nested VM, you have your analysis VM, and then you have your sandbox VM, so like your Windows VM inside that. The architectural challenge with something like that is you can only have a 32-bit nested VM, so if you've got some 64-bit malware, or you want to try it out in a 64-bit environment, you can't ship it in a nested VM. So flat VMs, the way I call it is flat VMs, is something where you have a VM here, and a VM here, and ESX, and you can just kind of scale out. It's much more scalable, but it is harder to manage. It requires a little bit of finagling, and you have to have service accounts and all this stuff to actually control the VMs. So when setting up your own Cuckoo environment, it's important to consider what you're setting up for. Are you just trying to set up a few things and run some samples you found on the internet, get familiar with it? In that case, yeah, you don't necessarily care if you can only run 32-bit applications or not. If you're setting up for an enterprise or something where you're going to be running hundreds of samples through it, you're probably going to want to do something like a flat architecture out there. If you're sharing it with friends, again, you've got to consider how you're going to handle this. So how does it work? So this is a very complicated diagram. It basically go through, you submit it through a web API or a website or an API. Cuckoo has both. And it goes to the analysis machine where it executes it. This machine listens, it monitors the changes, it monitors the network traffic, the memory, and everything like that. Once it's completed, it will shut the VM down and ships everything back to your Cuckoo machine. Then Cuckoo processes it through its signatures and everything like that, and then you get a nice pretty report out at the end. So, summarize the process for it. You submit a file, Cuckoo sends it to the VM for execution. It performs analysis on it once it's returned, and then you get reports back. So there's two main distributions for Cuckoo. There is the Cuckoo distribution, which is from CuckooSandbox.org, and then Brad Spengler has actually made a fork of 1.2 and made a lot of customizations to it. And these are kind of the two main forks that people use when we talk about Cuckoo. We've got the links here. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I did put the slides up on GitHub, and I'll have the link at the end again if you want to look at any of this stuff. So Cuckoo 1.2, I'm not going to focus on this too much anymore because they've got a new version out. It's really helpful. The guys, about 2 weeks ago, as I was preparing these slides, they released a brand new version of Cuckoo. So version 1.2 only supports 32-bit analysis of Windows XP and Windows 7. Really good documentation. It's got a lot of, it's from 2015, so there's a lot of community support around it. Really good signatures, but they're not updated very much anymore. It's very stable. One of the main features is this execution graph. I'm not going to go much into this because nobody really uses it anymore. One that was released about 2 weeks ago, 2.0 release candidate 2, has both 32-bit and 64-bit Windows support. It has Android, OS X, and Linux support. The documentation is very poor. They don't even tell you how to do it. You have to kind of figure it out yourself, which isn't impossible, but it's a fair bit of work. They have added the ability to import and export reports. They have updated community signatures. They have Snort and Suricata integration, which is really cool if you're doing a lot with traffic, network traffic of botnets and things like that. You can set your samples to generate Snort rules and things like that. Man-in-the-middle support for encrypted traffic, which is really cool because a lot of these new samples out there encrypt everything that they do. So if you can man-in-the-middle that, it's really neat to look at that traffic. And then they have malware scoring support, which is terrible. Don't use it. But sandbox baseline, which is something they're moving forward with, which is basically you run your sandbox without a sample, and then when you run the sample, the idea is you get the deviations from that baseline. Right now, it's memory only, so it would take a volatility sample and do that. So you don't have anything as far as like registry keys of Windows processes. It's just memory, but it's still pretty cool. And then the Spender Sandbox. It's basically the version 1.2 of Cuckoo, but they added 64-bit Windows support, normalized registry names, which makes it a lot easier. Go ahead.
Can you tell us a bit about the man-in-the-middle support? I mean, does that support stuff like, certificate pinning?
So I don't know the full support. They use something, it's a tool out there called man-in-the-middle proxy. It uses that to proxy, or to grab the traffic. So basically,
do you put like a root cert in the individual machine?
I believe so. I haven't played with that feature too much, but I think that's how it works because basically it's going to grab your encrypted traffic. So
okay, let me pull it out to the core of the question actually. So there's a couple of ransomware samples that establish connections to the Tor network.
Sure, they have Tor support too.
That's what I wanted to ask. If you guys can look into that as well.
Yeah, 2.0 actually does have Tor support. It has a whole bunch of network options. A lot of the cases I use, and personally, I don't deal with network traffic too much. I want to see if it's trying to make connections out, but I actually don't care about the network traffic. So they do have a lot of network, especially with the Snort, Tor proxying, and everything like that. So those features are there for Google. So again, 1.2, the Spender Sandbox, normalized registry names. Very easy to read these, whereas before you have a really long registry line, this kind of cuts it down and makes it much easier to process. Service monitoring, much better signatures. They're way better than the regular 1.2. You can comment on the malware, so if you're sharing this with a team, you can look at stuff and say, hey, look at this piece, it looks really neat, interesting, we need to do more digging in this. Better integrating anti-sandbox and anti-VM tools. I'll get into this a little bit better, or a little bit later, but malware authors try to detect that they're running in a sandbox a lot of the time. So it's really beneficial to be able to say, hey, I want to find ways to obfuscate that sandbox and evade that detection. And it's also very stable, very good documentation, and they regularly update the sandbox log. A very brief comparison of the two. Spender does not have Android or OS X or Linux support, and it does not have baselining, and the Cuckoo does not have commenting and normalized registry keys. That's just a general comparison. If you would have asked me before the 2.0 RC2 version, I would have recommended Spender hands down. But now the RC2 is a lot more stable, so if you're going to play with something, you might consider playing with it. It has a lot more updated features. It has a lot bigger team supporting it, and it's pretty solid. But there's a gap on documentation right now. They're still working on all that. So Cuckoo supports a bunch of analysis packages. You can a whole bunch here, but most things you're concerned with are executables, Word documents, sometimes Java applications, PDFs, things like that. And Cuckoo does a pretty good job when you submit it. It automatically detects it, but you can also tell it if you've got a sample that's like not flagging correctly. You can say, hey, this is a PDF, run as a PDF, or this is an executable, run as an executable. Again, I'm going to go over some quick pages that Cuckoo has by default. You can submit, you can have package selection, machine selection, override the timeout value, how long it'll actually execute the sample. So you can set a default, but if you know the sample takes forever or tries to wait the system out, you can override that. You can set clock options. So if you've got a malware that only executes on a certain time, you can actually set your VM to go to that time that you want it to run at. You can disable VM interaction, so if a sample pops up a window, Cuckoo automatically tries to click through the windows and say open things and close things and hit next, cancel, and things like that. And then you can enable or disable memory analysis if you have volatility and so on. The overview page has information. You can set up YAR signatures to work with Cuckoo. Your community-based signatures or your custom signatures gives information on DNS and other network traffic, and then file process and registry activity. You can see what files are open, what files are modified, deleted. Same with registry and processes. Static analysis page just kind of goes over. I showed you guys some screenshots earlier. All those were pulled from the static analysis page. You get a lot of information here: the reported and actual checksums, compile times, metadata, memory information, the imports that the kernels have. These are really important a lot of times because when a sample executes, it'll pull in certain samples, and that may indicate what type of malware you're looking at. And then it looks into virus code and get information if the sample that you're submitting is actually known malware. The behavioral analysis page, I'm going to show a sample of this towards the end. It's really cool. It goes over, and so the top sample you see, it is the sample we submitted, but it also spawns off several applications inside of it. So a lot of the times when you execute a sample, you want to see, like, all right, I'm submitting this, but what is it spawning off? Is it spawning off Explorer window? Is it spawning off some sort of firewall rule? Is it running Adobe PDF or something like that? And inside here, you can actually see all this, and then you can actually get process by process breakdown of what the sample is doing, and it's filterable. It's really cool. Network analysis page has a breakdown of type by traffic. So you have DNS, TCP, UDP, IRC, ICMP, a whole bunch of stuff. And if it's in plain text, and I think with man in the middle, you can also see this now, you can actually look at what traffic is being sent. So if you have somebody that's running a backdoor, you can see the connection it establishes, what it's exfiltrating through network data, and you can filter through all that, and it's really cool. And then you can also download the PCAP file and run your own filters through that offline if you look for that. Drop files page, if application, so most applications, if you're installing something, you're going to hit next, 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 and it's going to drop a whole bunch of stuff to your hard drive. Cuckoo tracks every single file that is extracted from the file, and then you can actually go in and see if it's been analyzed through virus code. You can resubmit the sample for analysis. or if it's a text file, you can read the contents of the text file. And then there's a whole bunch of additional pages for recording comments and things like that, which don't really provide too much information, but are good to have. So let's change gears again. Malware authors are smart. They know that we're trying to figure out what they're doing and trying to bypass what they're doing and create better tools. So I'll ask you guys, what are some tools that the malware authors use to detect sandbox analysis? Go ahead.
Detect virtual machines, the buffers.
Sure.
For example, VM detection or debugger detection.
Sure. So here's a brief list. They detect your process names. Do you have virtual vbox tray.exe running in there? Registry entries. All of these, if you install any of these tools, they have a whole set of registry keys that are associated with them. Device names. VMs have VirtualBox and VMware. All these have standard device names. CPU IDs that are associated with them. The MAC addresses for all of their default NICs are in a certain range. Same with IP addresses. A lot of them, and it's not a guarantee, but they have a standard set of IP ranges that are associated with them. Auto start entries again, your VirtualBox trays, start menu items, and date and time. There's so much in there that can be searched for, and then the malware authors just not run the sample when they check for it.
So, given the proliferation of virtual machine use in enterprises, are malware authors really concerned with not running on VMs? Or?
So they are, and there's actually a few guys out there that have developed tools that that actually go in and harden VMs. And the way they harden it is they take they spray the system with different things, and they'll create different fake processes that they know malware authors are looking for. And again, it's security through obscurity, I guess. But a lot of these guys will do that, and it's somewhat effective. It's not always effective.
What are the names of those tools?
I do not know off the top of my head, but I can look them up. They have GitHub projects that do that. So some detection countermeasures, kind of hinted at some of these countermeasures just briefly, but remove these VM-related registry keys, change your device names, change your MAC addresses. Don't install the toolbox or the different additions that come with these VM applications. Your VMs may not run as optimally as they should, but at the same time, if your goal is to avoid malware, or to avoid detection of malware, then you don't want to have those in there. Make your system look used. This is actually really important, really underrated. Before you take your snapshot to hook it into Cuckoo, go browse the internet a few times, open some applications, install some applications that you don't need on there. Make sure that you know what these applications do, because if they're making extraneous network connections while your VM is analyzing, you don't want to have a lot of white noise that's going to impact your analysis. So you want to know what's on your system and know that's why certain things are happening. But you do want to make it look used, because a lot of VMs or a lot of malware will go out there and say, hey, does this look like a VM? Has it got any users on it? Does it have any files in the downloads directory? And cut off. Have more than one CPU, and have more than a gig or two of RAM. VMs don't really use all that RAM, so it's not a big deal to allocate the RAM. There's a tool out there called VMcloak. It's really cool. I've committed some code to this one. It's by one of the Cuckoo Sandbox authors, and basically what it'll do is it will spin up a VM for you for one of a handful of operating systems. You can install a application stack on it, and it also applies a handful of configuration items that avoid detection. So it's a really cool software stack. It's automated, and it's pretty fun, and it takes out a lot of manual work that you used to have to put in. Verify your countermeasures. So your anti-VM detection countermeasures. There is a cool tool out there called PA-Fish, Paranoid Fish. You run it through your sandbox, and it'll generate, it runs a whole bunch of checks, and it generates a report at the end, and it tells you how your sandbox did, what it passed on, what it failed on. It doesn't get updated often, maybe once or twice a year, but it's still a pretty good tool to like get a good start from. So one last note on VMs, and this is kind of hinted on based on what I've been talking about before. Malware behaves differently in different environments, right? So sometimes it executes, sometimes it doesn't. You need multiple environments to test your samples if you're really trying to be thorough about it. You know, an application is going to run differently on Adobe Acrobat 9 versus 10 versus 11. Same with WinZip or 7-Zip or any of these applications out there. Same with your web browser, especially your web browsers out there. You know, try a system with Windows or IE8 or IE9 or IE10, Firefox or Chrome, different software versions, because a lot of these things try to find a application that has a known vulnerability and exploit that vulnerability. So if that vulnerability is able to be exploited on your system, then you're going to get a lot more information than if it just starts up, does a check, and then it shuts down. So let's look at a few pieces of malware. So this one is called news.exe, and when you run it, it looks a lot like this. It doesn't look like anything on the front. It just sits there. Well, what is it actually? It's this piece of Syria malware that was distributed to target dissidents in Syria using something called a blot binding. It's like the type of malware. Some of the information that's really interesting on it is to look at the compile time. The copyright time is 9 years before the compile time, and the original file name. So one of the things that this piece of malware does is it reaches out to this malware site, or this dynamic DNS site, Aliyah Mahmoud. I don't pronounce these things very well, so yeah. But she's like a known Syrian singer. So a lot of people would look at this traffic, especially if you're in Syria, I guess, you know, and they would say, "Oh, that's okay. Somebody's going to a fan site." Multiple startup registry keys are committed, and it's one of the most common things we see when we're looking at keyloggers is this get async key state key. When you see this, you're almost guaranteed to have a keylogger on the system. Now, the really cool thing is this execution tree. So if you look at it, the original name of the sample is news.exe. And then it spawns itself, and inside of its spawn, you see 2 instances of chrome.exe. Again, things that should pass a lot of application whites that they're sandboxing things if it's looking for an executable. But inside that chrome.exe, you see a netsh command. Anybody know what that netsh command is doing? Opening the firewall. So it's opening the firewall for this chrome.exe to go out and do stuff.
Is that the original Chrome.exe or is it something else?
It's a backward chrome.exe. And if you look at the application where it's opening, it's actually opening it in the temp directory. So I don't know how many chrome.exe people run chrome.exe out of their temp directory, but I don't know if that's a safe place to whitelist chrome.exe. And then it runs all these other services too. It's basically gathering information about the system here. And then if we look at the signatures that are popping on it, we got a lot. This is just with the basic community signatures from Cuckoo. These are getting updated all the time by the community and lots of good information. So you can see some of the bigger ones are in red. Collects information to fingerprint the system. It gets the Windows ID. Probably this, so again, this is to fingerprint the sample. Go ahead.
This is from Cuckoo or
Say that again.
which version of
This one's on the Spinner Sandbox, but actually a lot of these signatures are on both. there's a few people that try to port the signatures from to each one. But yeah, both versions will pop a dozen signatures on this sample. And that's one reason I like using this in a lot of demos, is because there's so much information that you can get on this one. Actually, going back to this, I think you can, if anybody wants to download the malware, it's on SyriaMalware.org or something like that. They got a whole bunch of them. It's really a fun site to play with. People look at me weird when I say, hey, you want a piece of fun malware? They're like, what? Next one we have is Loader.exe. It's a Chimera ransomware. It's one of the big things you see on this one is it spiders almost every single folder on the system. You get all your program files directories are spidered, all your user directories are spidered. And then you notice a lot of interesting things when you look at the modified files and the deleted files. So you see a whole bunch of files deleted, 1,000, 2,000 files deleted, depending on how much is on your system. And then for every deleted file, there's a new file that has a .crypt extension. And then you get this nice little file that says all your files are encrypted.html. So it's really nice of them to encrypt all your files, because encryption's good, right? Looking at this through static IP calls, so it reaches out to a certain IP, and I guess it sends the encryption key online, and then it also tries to go out and identify what your IP is, so it sends some of that information together, because a lot of these authors are trying to make sure that the right person is unlocking stuff, because that's nice. You shouldn't be able to unlock somebody else's files, right? And then if a lot of crypto calls that you see with ransomware associated in here, you see these two DLLs and the extensions that are loaded with them, crypt import key, export key. All of these things are Windows systems, Windows services. Malware is like infamous for just using stuff that's on Windows. They don't need to import custom libraries and do anything like that. When Microsoft provides a great ecosystem to encrypt all your files. Another really cool one that I've got here is Autohotkey.exe. I don't know what Autohotkey.exe means. I'm sure somebody had some use for it. But it's called a Petya ransomware. And so this one, it scans all of your systems for antivirus and shuts them off, and in some cases it'll shut down if it gets detected, because it knows it'll get shut down. And then it modifies physical drive 0. Anybody know what that is? It's your master boot record. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but so you see similar crypto calls to Chimera inside the executable that it will potentially call, and then it invokes something called NTDLL, NT raise card error. What this is an undocumented Windows API that restarts the system. So why would you want to restart the system? It's really weird. Well, what's that? Right. So it modifies your master boot record. It encrypts that, reboots the system, and then you have a custom kernel that when your system starts up, it starts to encrypt everything for you. It's really nice. Again, encryption is good, right? One of the cool things, and I haven't gotten a chance to try this yet because, again, this only came out about 2 weeks ago. The new version of Cuckoo has something called Analysis Reboot Survival. So for malware like this, it will try to reboot the system. Cuckoo tries to survive that and then continue the analysis, which is, again, a really cool feature that we have. So this is just the beginning. There's tons of information out there about Cuckoo and malware analysis in general. I really recommend Malware Analysis Cookbook, the Practical Malware Analysis. If you're going to look into memory analysis, The Art of Memory Forensics is written by the guys that do the volatility framework, which is what Cuckoo uses for memory analysis. And then there's a few Twitter people out there. Physical Drive 0, he posts lots and lots of malware, and you can just go find the samples and run them in your sandbox. And then 2 Cuckoo authors, and then there's me. I don't really post that much, but again, I'm trying to get 95 followers by the end of this talk. I need 3 more. Reddit has really good information on malware and our malware, our NetSec. I also highly recommend Primal Security Podcast, primalsecurity.net. That's me. some of the guys back here. And then we have info.speakeasy.org. There's a guy out there that posts a lot of information on how to set up certain sandboxes and a whole bunch of things. Really, really good information. Check that out. So this is me, again, Lane Huff, security engineer. Slides are on GitLab or GitHub. Do I have any questions? Go ahead.
You said there would be an interaction.
No, it's been around for a while,
Okay.
and they're always tweaking it. And a lot of the samples have you can go into Cuckoo and actually add lists of files that or links that I'll click on because it tries to say, oh, I see an exploit, so I know the text next, and I'll click on that. And a lot of people have been adding things for different languages and different verbiage just based on the samples that they're submitting to make sure it goes through correctly.
Do you have an idea of what that build is? Like, I did it years ago and it was all that.
It's been in Cuckoo for at least 2.5 years. Anybody else?
Yeah, if you're playing around with ransomware, how often are you able to extract the encryption keys out of memory?
So I haven't tried to do that. It's probably possible. So my personal experience with Cuckoo is I use it a lot so I am in a giant software assurance platform. So we try to detect unwanted behaviors from samples of software that we think are legitimate. So we try to establish baselines and say anything that deviates from these baselines, we don't want this thing. So obviously malware it falls within that range, but I haven't done too much with memory analysis personally.
If you were to run Cuckoo in the VM, do you recommend a hypervisor that you think is better, or is there one that you should definitely go with?
So a lot of it depends on what you're comfortable with, I think. When I started off, I was running everything with, again, a VM within a VM, and I was using VirtualBox. VirtualBox was their default virtual environment for a long time. Right now I'm using ESX because I have a nice ESX setup, and it's really easy to use once you're comfortable with it, and it's really nice, especially if you're submitting a bunch of samples to it. So you just have to have a service account that will spin those VMs up and then shut them down and everything like that. So really it's what you're comfortable with. I don't think any of them have any significant drawbacks to using.
Any commercial applications that are using Cuckoo? I mean, any commercial, is there like a commercial license or something like that?
So they don't have a commercial license. It's I think GPL v3. Depending on what your use is, I don't think it's a problem using it. I know the Cuckoo guys have like some sort of support thing that they sell to people, but it's only support. It's not like using the application because the application is free and open source.
So it looks like Cuckoo is really good at developing IOCs, but one of the questions I get asked a lot in forensics is, was regulated data access or exfiltrated from an organization? Can you use Cuckoo to make any sorts of determinations about behavior with respect to regulated data?
If you're talking about running the sample through it, you can see what it looks for, like if it's trying to scan certain data files. And then if you wanted to, you could play with your VM a little bit and put files in there and see what it does with them, right? So it has all sorts of network analysis tools in there, so you can see if it's trying to copy those files outside of your network.
Were there any requests to add something like a timeline into the Cuckoo interface? I mean, arguably Cuckoo does a great job at exposing what each one does, network behavior, file drops, registry changes, and handle the local and all that stuff. But have you thought about adding like a timeline view? File executed at timestamp X, then it did that at timestamp Y, and so on and so forth.
So I just want to I am not a Cuckoo developer. I work with it a lot. I've worked with guys a little bit that develop it, but I'm not a developer. But so if we go back to one of the slides, let me slide it back. So if you look at the behavioral analysis page, each of these executables and everything that they do inside of it, it actually does have a timestamp on it, so you can get that information as far as the timeline goes. But each individual application, every time it does something, even though it might be as simple as spinning up an exe and shutting it down, there's a ton of calls that are associated with that, so I don't think there's any way to get a pretty timeline out there. But it does have everything is set in a timeline, and you can associate that if you need to in some sort of custom application.
If you have multiple setups for VMs, it takes a lot of time to say run several setups. Do you have any suggestions for maybe you use that more intelligent, like maybe results and determine that are second line?
So if you're saying you have one sample and you want to run it against multiple environments, so like a VM that has Windows 7 versus a VM that has Windows 8, I don't think that they have anything in there that does that right now. In a lot of those cases, I think developing your own script that would post against the API. So you can specify through the API the machines that run. So if you know you have a sample that is going to act differently in different environments, it might be smart to just do like a handful of posts that will go to each and every VM in your environment. But that should be, it's pretty easy. It's built into the API. Anyone else? All right. So no other questions. I think we're good.